My name is Mike. I work the night shift at a McDonald's in a small town. It's not the most exciting job, but it pays the bills. I usually work late, flipping burgers, cleaning tables, and taking orders from sleepy drivers who pass through the drive-thru. Most nights are quiet, most nights are normal. But that night was different. It was a Friday, and I was working alone in the kitchen while my coworker, Ben, handled the counter. There weren't many customers, just a couple of people finishing their meals in the dining area, and an old man sipping coffee in the corner. The lights inside flickered slightly, but I didn't think much of it. It was late, and I just wanted my shift to end. Then, at exactly 11:58 p.m., the drive-thru speaker crackled. 1 cheeseburger, no pickles. The voice was strange, deep, slow, almost like someone whispering into a broken microphone. It gave me chills. I glanced at Ben. He had heard it too. "That's weird," Ben muttered. "Did they sound sick to you?" I shrugged. "Maybe. I'll punch it in." I tapped the order into the register and waited for the car to pull up. The monitor showed a vehicle, a black sedan with flickering headlights. The windows were too dark to see inside. "Hello?" I called through the speaker. Silence. Then the voice spoke again, exactly the same as before. 1 cheeseburger, no pickles. I frowned. "Sir, I already got your order. Please pull up to the window." No response. The screen still showed the car waiting. A weird feeling crept over me, like something was watching me from the dark. "Maybe their speaker is busted," Ben said. "Go check." I sighed and stepped outside to get a closer look. But the moment I turned the corner, my stomach dropped. The car was gone. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the empty drive-thru lane. There were no tire marks, no fading tail lights, nothing. It was like the car had never been there at all. Ben stuck his head out the door. "What's up?" I swallowed hard. "The car's gone." He frowned. "Gone? Maybe they changed their mind." I nodded, though I wasn't convinced. Something felt wrong. The air was heavy, like a storm was about to hit, but the sky was clear. I shook it off and went back inside. Maybe I was just tired. The rest of the night was slow. No more customers. No more strange voices. By the time my shift ended, I had almost convinced myself I imagined the whole thing. But when I checked the order screen before leaving, my blood turned to ice. The cheeseburger, no pickles order was still there, uncompleted. And when I pulled up the security footage, things got even stranger. At 11:58 p.m., the camera clearly showed the drive-thru lane. But there was no car. Ben and I exchanged glances. He turned pale. "Dude, what does that mean?" I didn't know, but I had a bad feeling this wasn't over. A week passed, and nothing weird happened. I started to believe it was just a glitch, until the following Friday. 11:58 p.m. The speaker crackled to life again. 1 cheeseburger, no pickles. I dropped the drink I was holding. Ice scattered across the floor. Ben's face turned white. No way. I stared at the monitor, the same black sedan, the same flickering headlights. "No freaking way," Ben whispered. My hands trembled as I reached for the mic. "Sir, please pull forward." No response. The screen glitched, the car flickering in and out like a bad signal. Then the voice spoke again. 1 cheeseburger, no pickles. It was the exact same tone as last time. Not similar, identical, like a recording. I felt a deep, twisting fear settle in my chest. "Ben, call the manager." Ben grabbed his phone, but before he could dial, the lights in the restaurant dimmed. Then, all at once, every kitchen appliance shut off. The fryers, the grills, the beeping registers, everything. And the camera screen went black. "Mike," Ben whispered. The air turned ice cold. A knocking sound echoed through the empty drive-thru window. We turned slowly. A hand was reaching inside the restaurant. It was pale. too pale. The fingers were long and thin with blackened nails. It gripped the inside of the window frame, twitching slightly, like it was testing the space. Ben let out a choked gasp. "What the hell is that?" I grabbed a broom from the corner and slammed it against the hand. It jerked back, then vanished. The second it disappeared, the lights flickered back on. The machines beeped as they rebooted. The camera screen returned, showing nothing. The car was gone. The drive-thru lane was empty again. Ben and I stood there breathing heavily. The air smelled burnt, like something old and rotting. I turned to Ben. "I don't think that was a person." He didn't respond, because something else was still here. A single burger wrapper lay on the counter. It was open, half-eaten, and we hadn't made any food all night. The next morning, I quit. I didn't even wait for my next shift. Ben did the same, but before we left, we checked the security footage one last time. At 11:58 p.m., the screen glitched. The drive-thru showed the black sedan again, but this time, for a fraction of a second, we saw inside the car. A man sat in the driver's seat staring directly at the camera. His face was rotting, sunken eyes filled with nothing but darkness. His mouth was twisted into a smile. And then, in the final frame before the camera cut to black, he turned his head and waved. We left the McDonald's that day and never came back. But sometimes when I pass by late at night, I swear I still hear the drive-thru speaker crackle and the voice whispering from the darkness, "1 cheeseburger, no pickles." My name is Vin, and I work at a McDonald's in a small town. It's a simple job, flipping burgers, cleaning tables, and dealing with loud customers. But on weekends, things get crazier, especially when there are kids' birthday parties. That night, we had a big event planned. A local family had booked the play area for their son's 7th birthday. The highlight? A visit from Ronald McDonald himself. The parents had hired a performer to play Ronald. He was supposed to arrive at 6 p.m., entertain the kids, and hand out balloons. Easy enough. By 5:45 p.m., the restaurant was packed. Kids ran around, their laughter filling the air. Parents chatted over their meals. My coworker, Mia, was decorating the tables while I handled orders behind the counter. Then at 5:50 p.m., our manager, Greg, got a call. I saw his face turn pale as he answered. "What? You're still stuck?" he said, stepping away from the counter. When he hung up, he let out a frustrated sigh. "Ronald's car broke down. He's stuck across town. He won't make it." Mia groaned. "Great. What do we tell the kids?" But before we could decide, something strange happened. A man in a full Ronald McDonald costume walked into the play area. The red wig, the bright yellow jumpsuit, the oversized red shoes. He moved slowly, his limbs stiff, but the kids cheered the moment they saw him. I frowned. "Did Greg call for a replacement?" Mia shook her head. "Number I thought the guy canceled." We both watched as this Ronald knelt down, smiling, and pulled out a handful of red balloons. But something about him didn't feel right. The kids loved him. They ran up, grabbing balloons as he handed them out. Some parents even clapped. But I couldn't shake the weird feeling in my stomach. For one, the real Ronald was still stuck on the other side of town. Greg hadn't called for a replacement. So who was this? I nudged Mia. "Did you see him come in?" She shook her head. Number 1 second, he wasn't there, and the next, he was. We both watched closely. His movements were odd, almost too slow, like someone struggling to move inside the suit. His painted-on smile looked too wide, his eyes hidden in deep shadows under the wig. Then I noticed something that made my breath catch. The balloons. They were already floating, but he had never filled them with air. I turned to Mia, whispering, "How are they floating?" Before she could answer, Ronald suddenly lifted his head, and his empty black eyes locked onto mine. My whole body froze. His eyes weren't just dark, they were hollow, like deep tunnels leading into nothing. For a moment, no one else seemed to notice. The kids laughed, running around with their balloons. Parents smiled, chatting over their food. But I knew something was wrong. Mia must have felt it too because she grabbed my arm. "Vin, we should tell Greg." I nodded slowly. We turned toward the counter, but before we could move, the lights flickered. The restaurant went dead silent for a second, and when the lights came back, Ronald was gone. I whipped my head around. Nowhere. He had just disappeared. Mia's grip on my arm tightened. Where did he go? A single red balloon floated down from where he had been standing. It landed right in front of me. I picked it up, my hands shaking. There was something written on it. Vin. My name. Mia and I ran to Greg's office. He looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" "Check the cameras," I gasped. "Now." Greg frowned but turned to his computer, pulling up the security footage. We watched the video from the play area. At 5:58 p.m., the kids were running around. No Ronald. At 5:59 p.m., he was there. No one saw him enter. No one opened the door for him. He just appeared. Greg leaned closer. "What the hell?" We watched as he handed out balloons, moving slowly, his head tilting at odd angles. Then, at 6:04 p.m., the screen glitched. Static filled the video for 3 seconds. When it cleared, he was gone. Mia whispered, "This isn't possible." Greg rewound the footage, frame by frame. At the exact moment the screen glitched for just one frame, we saw something. Not Ronald. Something inside the suit. A thin, bony figure, stretched and twisted, its long fingers pressing against the fabric from the inside. Its face, hidden beneath the mask, was grinning through the paint. Then the screen cut to black. None of us knew what to say. Greg finally exhaled. "That thing, it wasn't human." Mia turned to me, her face pale. "Vin, what did the balloon say?" I swallowed hard. "My name." Greg shot up from his chair. "That's it. We're closing early." We rushed back to the front of the restaurant, but before we could shut down, I heard a sound that made my heart stop. Laughter. From the play area. We slowly turned. A single red balloon floated in the air, drifting toward us. Then the lights flickered again. For a brief second in the reflection of the glass window. Ronald was standing behind us, smiling. The lights snapped back on. He was gone. The balloon popped in front of us, and written on the burst pieces in smeared red letters, "See you soon, Vin." That was my last night at McDonald's. I never went back, but sometimes, late at night, when I pass by the empty restaurant, I swear I still hear the sound of balloons squeaking and soft, distant laughter. My name is Jake. I work the night shift at McDonald's in a small town. It's a simple job, taking orders, flipping burgers, and mopping floors. The work is easy, but the shifts are long. Most nights I finish late, catch the last bus, and walk the rest of the way home. That night my shift ended at 1 a.m. The restaurant was quiet, just me and my manager Tony locking up. As I stepped outside, the air felt strange, too still, too heavy. I caught the bus and sat by the window, watching the empty streets pass by. That's when I saw it. A McDonald's, glowing in the dark. At first I thought I was just tired, but something was wrong. There was only one McDonald's in town, the one I had just left. Yet, there it was. I pressed my face against the window. The golden arches shined too brightly, the lights inside too white. The restaurant looked identical to mine, but something felt off. Before I could think, the bus stopped. My stop. I hesitated. Then, curiosity got the best of me. I stepped off the bus and turned back toward the glowing McDonald's. It shouldn't be there, but it was, and I needed to know why. I walked slowly, my shoes crunching against the pavement. As I got closer, the air felt colder. The building was exactly the same as the one I worked in. Same sign, same red and yellow colors, same big glass windows. But something was wrong. I peered inside. The customers sat at tables completely still. Not eating, not talking, just staring. I stepped closer. The employees behind the counter looked exactly like us. Same uniforms, same name tags. And then my stomach dropped, because the person flipping burgers was me. Same messy brown hair, same uniform, same tired face. I stumbled back, heart pounding. How was this possible? Then my duplicate stopped flipping burgers. Slowly, he lifted his head and looked straight at me. His eyes locked onto mine. And then, he smiled. That smile wasn't normal. It was too wide, stretching across his face in a way that wasn't human. My chest tightened. That thing wasn't me. I took a shaky step back. My hands felt ice cold. I needed to get away. Then, one of the customers turned their head. I froze. Another head turned. Then another. One by one, the motionless customers all turned to face me. Their eyes were empty. Their mouths were slightly open, like they were waiting for something. Then they all smiled. The same too wide grin as my copy behind the counter. I spun around and ran. I didn't stop until I reached my street. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I looked back. The McDonald's was gone. The glowing lights, the still customers, all of it, like it was never there. The next day, I went back to work, trying to convince myself it was just a bad dream. But when I walked in, Tony gave me a weird look. "Didn't think you'd come in after last night," he said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Tony leaned on the counter. "I saw you, man, working the night shift. Thought you'd call in sick today." I stared at him. "I wasn't here last night, Tony." He raised an eyebrow. "I literally saw you. I even waved, but you ignored me." My blood went cold. I turned to Mia, another coworker. "Did you see me here last night?" She nodded, looking uneasy. "Yeah, you were flipping burgers, but you were acting weird, like you were in a trance." I felt sick. I needed proof. "Pull up the security footage," I told Tony. He sighed but opened the office door, leading me to the cameras. He rewound the footage to 1:30 a.m. when he claimed to have seen me. And there I was. Or something that looked like me. It moved too stiffly. It never blinked. And when Tony walked past the counter, my copy didn't acknowledge him at all. Then at 2 a.m. the screen glitched. When the footage returned, the other me was gone. The kitchen was empty. And the last thing the camera recorded? A single smiling face pressed against the drive-thru window, watching, waiting. I quit that same day. But before I left, I checked one last thing, the employee schedule. And there, listed under the night shift from 12 a.m. to 2 a.m., Jake, confirmed in attendance. I never clocked in. I never worked that shift. But something did. Something that looked exactly like me. I moved out of town a week later, but I still have nightmares about that fake McDonald's. Because sometimes when I walk alone at night, I swear I see its golden arches glowing in the distance. And standing inside, behind the counter, is me. Smiling. Waiting. For someone to step inside. My name is William. I work the night shift at McDonald's, the one near the old gas station. It's usually quiet at night, just a few late-night customers, truck drivers, college students, and night owls looking for a quick bite. But there was one customer who stood out. A man. He came in every single night. Always around 11:45 p.m. Always sat in the same corner booth. His order? Black coffee. No sugar. He never spoke much. Just nodded, took his cup, and sat down. He would stare at nothing, slowly sipping his coffee as if lost in another world. The other employees noticed him too. Maggie, the girl on the closing shift with me, once whispered, He's kind of creepy, don't you think? I shrugged. I mean, he just sits there, not bothering anyone. She shuddered. Yeah, but he never blinks. That made me laugh. But deep down, I knew what she meant. There was something strange about him. Then one night, he didn't show up. At first, we thought nothing of it. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he had finally decided to go somewhere else. But when I went to clean up before closing, I stopped cold. His coffee cup was still there, untouched, sitting in his usual spot, and the coffee inside was still hot. I frowned, picking up the cup. It felt warm in my hands. That wasn't possible. We hadn't seen him all night. No one had served him. Hey, Maggie, I called. Did you take a coffee to the corner booth? She looked up from mopping the floor. Nope. Why? I hesitated. His coffee is here. She frowned. Whose coffee? I pointed at the cup. The old guy, the one who sits there every night. Maggie's face paled. She slowly shook her head. He didn't come in tonight, Will. I stared at the cup. The steam still rose from the black surface. I dumped it in the trash and shook off the weird feeling creeping up my spine. But the next night, when we started our shift, the same coffee cup was back on the table, sitting in the same spot, still full, still hot. Maggie gasped. That's not funny, Will. I didn't do this. She looked around. Then who did? Neither of us had an answer, but I had a feeling we weren't alone. The cup kept coming back, every night. No matter how many times we threw it away, the next shift would find it right back on the table, full, steaming, always at 11:45 p.m. It was starting to freak me out. Maggie refused to go near the corner booth anymore. I had to clean it myself, even though I hated touching that cup. Finally, I asked our manager, Tom, about it. He had worked here for over 10 years. If anyone knew what was going on, it was him. I cornered him in the office after closing. Tom, I said, who is that guy? He didn't answer at first, just rubbed his temples like he had a headache. Then, in a low voice, he said, that man died 2 years ago, right in that booth. I stopped breathing. What? Tom sighed. He had a heart attack, late at night. Nobody noticed until we went to close. He was just sitting there, coffee still in his hands. I felt sick. Then why does his cup keep coming back? Tom's face was pale. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that cup of coffee, waiting for someone who would never return. The next shift, I was determined to end this. At 11:45 p.m., I stood by the counter, staring at the empty corner booth. My hands were sweating. Maggie stood beside me, gripping my sleeve. What are you gonna do? She whispered. I didn't answer, because at that moment, the front door swung open, but no one walked in. A gust of cold air rushed past us, and then the coffee cup appeared on the table, right before our eyes. Maggie screamed. I felt like my legs had turned to stone. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Then, in the glass window next to the booth, I saw something. A reflection. An old man, sitting at the table. His head tilted, his eyes locked onto mine. His mouth moved silently, like he was trying to speak. I turned around fast, but the booth was empty. Only the coffee cup remained. I don't know what happened that night. After that shift, Maggie quit. I don't blame her, but I stayed. I had to know. One night I sat in the corner booth at 11:45 p.m. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just waited. And then, the air grew colder, the lights flickered. I looked down. The coffee cup sat in front of me, but this time, it wasn't full. It was half empty, like someone had already taken a sip. A shiver ran down my spine. Then right next to my ear, I heard a whisper. Software tired. Thank you. I spun around, but no one was there. After that, the coffee cup never returned. I don't know what that whisper meant, but I think I think he finally finished his coffee and left. For good. My name is David, and I work the night shift at McDonald's. It's not a bad job, just boring most of the time. By midnight, the place is usually dead quiet, with only a few customers dropping by. That night was different. It was a Tuesday, and the shift was dragging. My coworker Lena leaned against the counter, tapping on her phone. "This is the slowest night ever," she groaned. I nodded, wiping down the coffee machine. I'd rather be busy than staring at the clock. Just then, the door chime rang. A customer walked in. I glanced up, expecting another late-night traveler. But something about him felt off. He wore a long hoodie that covered most of his face. His hands were stuffed into the pockets. He walked up to the counter without looking up. Then, in a low, rough voice, he muttered, "1 black coffee." I punched in the order and turned to make it. The coffee hissed as it poured into the cup. Something about the man made my skin prickle, but I told myself I was just tired. When it was ready, I placed it on the counter. "Here you go, sir." He didn't move. I waited. The air felt heavier. "Sir," I said again. Still no response. I frowned and turned to Lena. "Can you handle this?" She looked confused. "Handle what?" I turned back. The man was gone, but the coffee cup was still there, and next to it was a receipt. The date on it? 3 years ago. My heart skipped a beat. I picked up the receipt, my fingers trembling. It was old, slightly crumpled, but the ink was still clear. February 12th, 2021, 1 a.m. The exact same order, 1 black coffee. I looked around, trying to see where the man had gone. The restaurant was empty. The doors had never chimed again. "He just left, right?" I asked Lena. She raised an eyebrow. "Who?" I stared at her. "The guy in the hoodie." She blinked. "David." No one came in. I felt my stomach twist. "That's not funny, Lena." She crossed her arms. "I'm serious. You were just standing there, staring at the counter." I turned back to the coffee cup. Steam was still rising from it. I grabbed the receipt and ran to the manager's office. Tom, our night manager, was watching security footage. "Tom, check the cameras from a minute ago." He gave me a weird look but rewound the footage. I held my breath. On the screen, I saw myself, standing at the counter, placing the coffee down. But there was no customer. The cup had been sitting there on its own. I felt sick. "There was someone there," I insisted. "He ordered coffee. I saw him." Tom frowned at the screen. "No one's there, David." Lena walked in, arms crossed. "If this is a prank, it's not funny." I opened my mouth to argue when something on the receipt caught my eye. Under the printed date, there was handwritten text, a name, Michael Reed. I felt my chest tighten. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. I walked quickly to the employee board near the break room. It had pictures of past employees, with a small memorial section for those who had passed away. There, at the bottom of the list, was a faded photograph. Michael Reed, a former employee. He had died 3 years ago. I stared at the picture, my hands sweating. Michael Reed. He had worked here before me. I never met him, but I remembered hearing a story about him from the older staff. I turned to Tom. "How did he die?" Tom sighed. "Heart attack, right there." He pointed toward the corner of the restaurant, the same place the man had stood. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. "That coffee cup," I whispered. Tom's face darkened. "You should leave it alone." I looked back at the counter. The black coffee was still there, untouched. I grabbed it, walked outside, and poured it into the drain. The moment the last drop fell, the streetlights flickered, and from behind me, I heard a whisper. "Why?" I spun around. Nobody was there. but in the reflection of the McDonald's window, I saw a dark figure standing behind me, watching. The next night, I felt nervous about my shift. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but when I arrived, the coffee cup was back. Same spot, still steaming. My hands trembled. I turned to Lena. "Did you make this?" She shook her head. "Number, I just got here." I didn't know what to do. Then, at 1 a.m. sharp, the door chimed. I held my breath. A man in a long hoodie walked in. This time he looked up. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, like he had been dead for years. He opened his mouth. No sound came out. The lights flickered. When they came back on, he was gone. But on the counter, a new receipt had appeared. I picked it up with shaking hands. It read, "Thank you." I quit my job the next morning, but every time I pass that McDonald's at night, I see the steam rising from an untouched coffee cup, waiting for someone to serve him again.